The Vexari warships hung in orbit like ominous shadows, casting their dark reflections on Earth below. The planet, once a bastion of life and prosperity, now teetered on the edge of annihilation. Humanity had fought to survive, to claw its way out of extinction, but every victory felt temporary, every retreat marked by the brutal encroachment of a merciless alien force. Captain James Graves, once a leader among the Federation's finest, stood atop the crumbling cityscape of New York, watching the storm clouds gather. He hadn't seen Earth this broken since the invasion started, and the weight of it all pressed down on him. We've lost so much, he thought. How much longer can we hold on? His comms buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. Graves, you're needed at the command center. We've got a situation, said Sergeant Kane, her voice sharp with urgency. The Vexari are about to launch another offensive, and we're too exposed here. Graves turned and surveyed the remnants of the once great city. The skyline was jagged, half-fallen buildings flanked by the charred remnants of humanity's last stand. The stench of fire and decay lingered in the air. I'm on my way, Graves replied, his voice low, his eyes steely with determination. He wasn't one to hesitate. He had led countless missions, faced down death time and time again, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for survival, this was a fight for the very soul of humanity. The command center was a chaos of flashing lights and shouting voices. Officers scrambled to decode Vexari transmissions, their faces pale as the reality of the situation sank in. Graves stepped through the door, his presence commanding immediate attention. He had seen too many battlefields, too many broken souls, but this felt like the beginning of the end. Graves, General Matthews, the Federation's highest-ranking officer left on Earth, greeted him, his face grim. We need to talk. The Vexari have already infiltrated our outer defenses, and if we don't act quickly, we're going to lose the last stronghold we've got. Not if we have anything to say about it, Graves said, his voice steady as ever. What's the plan? Matthews hesitated before stepping closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's something you need to know. Something we've just uncovered. The Vexari, they're not just attacking. They've got an inside man. Graves narrowed his eyes. You're saying there's a traitor? Matthews nodded. A high-ranking officer. They've been feeding the Vexari information. This whole war, it's been manipulated from the inside. Graves felt the ground beneath him shift. A traitor? This wasn't just a battle against alien invaders. This was a betrayal of everything they'd fought for. How much time do we have? Graves asked, his mind racing. We're already too late to stop the incoming assault. But if we act fast, we might be able to turn the tide. Matthews paused, looking him dead in the eyes. We need to find out who's behind this and eliminate the threat. Fast. Graves clenched his fists, the anger bubbling up inside him. I'll find them. The mission was set. The traitor had to be uncovered, and the attack needed to be repelled. But as Graves and his squad moved out, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than they realized. The Vexari had always been ruthless, but a human ally? That was a new level of betrayal. His mind raced as he prepared for what was to come. Graves' squad, a group of highly trained soldiers, had made their way to the front lines, securing a position within the ruins of New York. The city, once a symbol of human progress, was now a battleground. It had become a prison, a cage for those who remained. Graves had seen humanity at its lowest, but this was a different kind of hell. Graves, Kane's voice broke through his thoughts. We've spotted Vexari scouts up ahead. They're making their move. We need to move now. Graves didn't need to be told twice. Form up! We push forward, fast and hard. This ends today. As the squad moved deeper into the war-torn city, Graves could hear the distant hum of Vexari war machines, the sound like a predator stalking its prey. He could almost feel their presence, the weight of the enemy closing in. They were relentless. But so were humans. They reached a crossroads, where the team set up a temporary defensive perimeter. Graves took a knee, surveying the area. His instincts told him something was off. The enemy wasn't just advancing, they were planning something. But what? Graves, look! Ramirez, one of his most trusted soldiers, whispered, pointing to the horizon. There, amidst the ruins, was a Vexari transport ship, too far out to be part of the usual attack. Graves' mind raced. That's not part of their standard tactics. No, Kane said. And it's headed right for us. Before Graves could give the order to move, a barrage of fire erupted from the Vexari ship, tearing into their position. The squad dove for cover, the ground shaking beneath them. The battle had begun, and it was fiercer than anything they had anticipated. We've got incoming! Ramirez shouted, firing back at the advancing alien forces. Graves, adrenaline pumping, barked out orders. Focus fire on their command ship. We take it down now, or we're finished. But just as they launched their counterattack, a sudden explosion tore through the building beside them. The shockwave sent them sprawling, and when Graves managed to pull himself to his feet, his vision swam with disorientation. And that's when he saw it. The face of the traitor. Standing amidst the wreckage, watching them with cold, calculating eyes, was Colonel Hawk, Graves' former superior. The traitor. The one who had sold them out. Hawk's voice rang out across the battlefield, smug and triumphant. You thought you could win? You thought you could defeat the Vexari? Graves' eyes blazed with fury. You betrayed us all. Hawk's lips curled into a cruel smile. I didn't betray humanity. I saved it. You just don't understand the bigger picture. Graves raised his rifle, aiming it directly at Hawk. I understand perfectly. You're dead. The battle raged on, but Graves' focus had narrowed. This was personal. The fate of Earth was no longer just about surviving the Vexari. It was about stopping this traitor from delivering humanity's soul to the enemy. Graves fired. And the world went dark. Cliffhanger *. The last thing Graves saw before the explosion consumed him was the expression on Hawk's face, calm, like he had already won. Was this the end for humanity? Or could Graves' final stand be the catalyst for Earth's survival? Graves' eyes snapped open as the sound of distant explosions vibrated through the shattered remains of New York. The city, once a symbol of human resilience, was now a battleground. Buildings that had once touched the sky lay in ruins, their skeletal remains casting long shadows over the deserted streets. He could smell the acrid stench of burning metal and sulfur, a grim reminder that humanity's survival was hanging by a thread. He shook his head, trying to clear the lingering fog of unconsciousness. His muscles ached, his body battered from the blast. Slowly, he pushed himself up, wiping the dirt and blood from his face. His squad was scattered around him, regaining their footing as the Vexari offensive continued to intensify. Graves, you good? Kane's voice crackled through his comms. Her voice was always steady in the chaos. That's why he trusted her. She was the anchor when everything else threatened to drift away. I'm alive, Graves muttered, feeling a surge of frustration. But we've got bigger problems. He looked around. The Vexari had pushed deeper into the city, their ships hovering overhead, firing precision beams that reduced buildings to rubble in seconds. Their forces were vast, relentless, and they weren't showing any signs of slowing down. We need to regroup, Graves said. We can't take them head-on with what we've got. We need a plan. Kane's voice came back through, more urgent now. Graves, we've got a situation. Hawk's been spotted. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Colonel Hawk, once a respected officer in the Federation, now a traitor. The one person Graves never thought would turn his back on humanity. The thought of him, standing with the Vexari, watching them tear apart Earth, was maddening. Where is he? Graves demanded, his hands clenched into fists. He's in the heart of the city, Graves. The Vexari's command center, Kane replied. And he's got Federation soldiers with him. We think he's been coordinating the Vexari attack from within. The revelation hit Graves like a hammer. It was worse than he had feared. Hawk wasn't just a traitor. He was actively leading the charge against Earth. His betrayal wasn't just a personal affront, It was a death sentence for humanity. "We'll take him down," Graves said, his voice low and filled with resolve. "He's the key. If we stop him, we stop this madness." Graves gathered his squad, each member an expert in their field, but they all shared one common trait: their loyalty to humanity. They were the last hope, the thin line between survival and extinction. The team moved out swiftly, navigating through the debris and destruction that filled the streets. The city, once a vibrant hub of human culture, was now a haunting graveyard. Every corner they turned, every building they passed, seemed to tell the same story: humanity was losing. Graves felt the weight of that loss, but he pushed it down. This wasn't the time for doubts. As they approached the Vexari's command center, the signs of their presence grew stronger. The air was thick with the hum of alien technology, and the ground beneath them vibrated with the low rumble of war machines moving just out of sight. "Stay sharp," Graves ordered, his eyes scanning the area. "We don't know how many of them are inside." They reached the entrance to the command center, a massive structure made of gleaming black metal that seemed to absorb the light around it. Graves could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. The final confrontation. "Graves," Ramirez, one of his most trusted soldiers, whispered, his voice tense. "There's movement inside. I count at least a dozen Vexari soldiers." "Only 12? Graves said, raising an eyebrow. "Well, that's promising." Ramirez shot him a look. "Don't get cocky, sir." Graves smirked. "Stay focused. We hit them fast. We need to keep the element of surprise." With a swift motion, Graves activated his rifle, and the team moved into position. They stormed the entrance, catching the Vexari off guard. The first wave of soldiers fell quickly, their bodies crumpling to the floor in a heap of armor and alien flesh. But there was no time to savor the victory. The command center was vast, and the deeper they pushed, the more resistance they faced. The Vexari weren't going to give up without a fight. "Keep moving!" Graves shouted, his voice ringing through the chaos. "We can't let them regroup." The squad fought their way through the narrow halls, their rifles spitting fire. Each step forward was met with fierce opposition, but they pushed through, driven by one singular goal: to reach Hawk. They finally arrived at the heart of the command center, a large room filled with high-tech consoles, alien machinery, and the oppressive hum of Vexari power. At the far end of the room stood a figure, his back turned to them, staring out of a massive viewport. His presence was almost magnetic, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Colonel Hawk," Graves said, his voice laced with fury. Hawk turned, his face the picture of cold indifference. His once human features were now distorted by cybernetic enhancements, the product of years of working with the Vexari. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and the smile on his face was that of a man who knew victory was within reach. "I see you've made it this far," Hawk said, his voice smooth, almost amused. "But it won't matter in the end. You're too late, Graves. Earth is already lost." "Not while I'm still breathing," Graves growled, raising his rifle. "You betrayed everything you swore to protect. For what? Power? Glory? You're no better than the Vexari." Hawk's expression didn't change. "I'm better than you, Graves. I've seen the truth. The Vexari are the future, and humanity is a relic. I'm giving you the opportunity to join us. You can serve the Vexari, help lead the next chapter of evolution. Or you can die." The words hit Graves like a slap. The man he had once respected, the man he had fought alongside, was now an enemy, a traitor to humanity, willing to abandon it for personal gain. "I'll never join you," Graves said, his voice cold. "You're not saving humanity. You're condemning it." Hawk's eyes narrowed. "Then die like the fool you are." Before Graves could respond, the room erupted into chaos. Vexari soldiers poured in from every direction, their weapons blazing with deadly precision. But the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. And as Graves fought, his heart burned with a single thought: he would end this. One way or another. Cliffhanger *. The firefight intensified. Vexari soldiers closed in on Graves and his team. As the situation grew desperate, Graves faced a choice: fight until his last breath, or make a final push to end the war. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and the acrid scent of ionized plasma. Graves could feel the heat of the flames licking the edges of the command center, but he didn't flinch. His rifle was locked in his grip, his heart pounding in sync with the firefight erupting around him. The Vexari were everywhere now, reinforcements had arrived, and the room was a maze of flashing lights, loud explosions, and the hiss of plasma weapons. "We're being overwhelmed!" Ramirez shouted from behind cover, his voice ragged. His rifle was smoking from overuse, but there was no time to reload. Graves gritted his teeth. The odds were shifting, the balance tipping away from their favor. The Vexari soldiers, augmented with their alien technology, were relentless. Every corner they turned, every hallway they advanced through, seemed to lead them into another ambush. But there was no retreat now. They were too close. Kane, ever the pragmatist, was on her feet, firing back at the advancing Vexari, but her eyes kept darting to Graves. "Graves! We need a way out!" Graves' mind raced. The Vexari were closing in on all sides. The traitor, Hawk, was still somewhere in the room, orchestrating the attack from behind a shield of alien technology. He couldn't be allowed to leave. This had to end here, and it had to end now. "No one leaves this room alive," Graves muttered under his breath, his voice a growl of resolve. "Not until Hawk answers for what he's done." But as Graves moved toward the central control unit, a searing pain shot through his side. He staggered, instinctively clutching at the wound, but the blood was already pooling on the floor beneath him. The Vexari had managed to slip past their defenses. One of them had gotten too close. Kane shouted his name as he crumpled to one knee, but his vision blurred, and his breath came in shallow gasps. "No time for this," Graves grunted, trying to push through the pain. "We end this now." A low rumble vibrated through the ground, and Graves could feel the walls shifting as something massive moved closer. The Vexari's war machine was nearing. His worst fear was coming to life. If that thing broke through, they'd all be dead. "Fall back!" Ramirez shouted. "We've got seconds before we're crushed under that thing's firepower." Graves' eyes flicked to the massive war machine, its towering frame nearly filling the entire doorway, its weapon systems locking onto the command center. He could see the Vexari's glowing eyes through the viewport. This was no ordinary soldier. It was their elite unit, capable of tearing through anything in its path. "Stay focused!" Graves shouted, his voice strained but firm. "We can't let them get to the control unit. That's our key to stopping them." He forced himself to stand, ignoring the pain in his side as he made his way toward the control center. Kane and Ramirez held the line, shooting at the Vexari soldiers who were closing in on their position, but the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Graves reached the central terminal, his fingers slick with sweat and blood as he punched in the sequence to access the Vexari's command network. The machine in front of him hummed to life, its interface lighting up with alien symbols and data streams. "It's locked," Graves muttered, slamming his fist against the console. "They've got a fail-safe. Hawk must have rigged it." He gritted his teeth. There was no time for subtleties now. "Ramirez! Kane! Hold them off. I'm going to bring the whole system down." "No!" Ramirez shouted from across the room. "The Vexari will retaliate. It'll collapse everything. Better everything collapse than we all die today." Graves snapped, his voice unwavering. He knew the risks. He understood that this could be a suicide mission. But humanity's survival was at stake, and he wasn't going to back down. Not when they were so close. With a final, desperate breath, Graves plunged his hand into the terminal, his fingers finding the manual override. The Vexari system sparked, glitching violently as he worked to break its defenses. The war machine outside fired a warning shot, the massive blast shaking the command center. Debris rained down from the ceiling, but Graves didn't flinch. He focused solely on the task at hand. Another explosion rocked the building, this one closer. It was a direct hit to their position, and Graves felt himself thrown back. Pain flared across his chest as the room spun. His vision blurred, but he knew he had to finish what he started. The Vexari had to be stopped. Almost there, Graves whispered to himself, blood dripping onto the terminal. His fingers were slick, slipping against the controls. The pain in his side was unbearable, but his will to survive, and to end the nightmare, was stronger. The screen in front of him flickered and then went black. For a moment, Graves feared it was over, that his efforts had been in vain. But then, *click*, the system came back online. A red warning blinked on the display, signaling the command center's self-destruct sequence had been initiated. Graves barely had time to breathe before Kane's voice came over the comms. "We're out of time. We've got to move, Graves!" He didn't need to be told twice. With a final glance at the console, he shouted, "Fall back! Get to the extraction point!" The squad fought their way out of the command center, moving through the twisting, crumbling hallways. Graves was still bleeding, but the adrenaline surged through him. The Vexari were pushing hard, but they had a fighting chance now. The floor shook again, the rumble growing stronger with each passing second. The building was coming down. Graves could hear the panicked shouts of his squad, but his focus was on the way forward. He led them through the corridors, knowing every second counted. "We're not going to make it!" Ramirez yelled as they rounded a corner and found the exit blocked by debris. "Trust me!" Graves shouted back, forcing his body through the wreckage, his hands pushing aside chunks of metal and concrete. "We are going to make it!" They burst out into the open, where the Federation warship was already descending from the sky, its massive engines kicking up debris as it landed. The squad sprinted toward it, the noise deafening as the Vexari war machines and soldiers followed them. Graves reached the ship first, his hands gripping the ladder. "Get in, now!" he shouted, his voice hoarse from the effort. Kane and Ramirez were right behind him, hauling themselves up into the ship. As the door slammed shut behind them, Graves collapsed against the wall, the weight of exhaustion and pain crashing down on him. The warship's engines roared to life, and as they took off into the sky, Graves looked back at the city below, the devastation they had left behind. He had led them out of the fire. But as he watched the flames of the Vexari's wrath burn bright below, he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Cliffhanger * the ship's radar blipped, a new signal coming in. A massive Vexari fleet, larger than anything they had faced before, was descending toward Earth. The battle was far from over. And this time, they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of the entire galaxy. The ship rumbled as it broke through Earth's atmosphere, leaving behind the city that had once been a symbol of human achievement. Now, it was nothing more than a smoking ruin, a testament to the brutal invasion that had pushed humanity to the brink. Graves sat slumped against the wall, his body bruised, bloodied, and exhausted. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going. Physically, he was spent. But mentally? His mind was still sharp, still reeling from the fight. The victory they had achieved didn't feel like a win. Not yet. "We made it," Ramirez said, his voice quiet, almost relieved. He was looking out the viewport at the retreating destruction below. Graves didn't respond right away. His mind kept flashing back to the fight in the command center, to the moment when he had thought it was all over. The explosion. The pain. The instinct to survive. They had escaped the worst of it, but the war wasn't finished. Far from it. Kane, sitting across from him, rubbed her temples, still processing what had just happened. "What the hell was that?" "Hawk, he was supposed to be one of us." "I don't know," Graves finally muttered, his voice hoarse from the chaos. "But I will find out. We need to figure out how far this betrayal goes." Her gaze locked with his, determination flickering in her eyes. "Hawk's gone, Graves. We're barely making it out of this. We can't keep chasing ghosts." Graves knew she was right. But the thought of letting Hawk's treachery slide, of not understanding how deep the corruption ran, gnawed at him. Hawk had been their leader, their mentor. To know that someone so trusted had sold out humanity for power, it wasn't just betrayal. It was an assault on everything they had fought for. But as much as he wanted answers, the larger battle for Earth's survival loomed. Before he could say anything more, the ship's artificial intelligence crackled to life. "Captain Graves, we are receiving a high-priority transmission from Federation Command." Graves rubbed his temples, frustration settling in his chest. "Patch it through," he ordered. The face that appeared on the screen was one he hadn't seen in months. General Matthews, his once commander, now the highest authority left in the Federation. His weathered face appeared stern, but his eyes betrayed the strain of the war. "Graves, it's good to hear your voice. We need to talk. The Vexari fleet isn't the only issue we're facing." Matthews' voice was heavy with urgency. Graves leaned forward, his attention snapped into focus. "What do you mean?" Matthews hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "We've uncovered something troubling. It's not just Hawk. We've identified multiple high-ranking officers within the Federation who've been compromised. This isn't just a military coup, it's a coordinated, systematic betrayal." Graves could feel his pulse quicken. "Are you telling me that the Federation has been infiltrated?" "Not just infiltrated," Matthews confirmed. "This goes beyond Hawk. These traitors have been feeding the Vexari intelligence, and they've been using Earth's defenses against us from the inside. We've been fighting a war we were doomed to lose from the start." Graves leaned back against the cold metal wall of the ship, absorbing the weight of Matthews' words. "How long has this been going on?" "Too long," Matthews answered. "We were blinded. And now now it's worse than we thought. The Vexari aren't just interested in Earth. They've been planning a galaxy-wide purge. Earth's destruction is only the first step in their campaign." Graves stood up, his muscles screaming in protest, but his resolve solid. "How do we stop them?" "We don't stop them alone," Matthews replied. "We need the galaxy united, and that means going beyond Earth's borders. We've got allies waiting on the outskirts, but we need to strike before the Vexari make their move. They've got a fleet preparing for a final push, and they'll strike at the heart of the Federation next." The weight of the moment hung in the air. The Federation, once a symbol of hope, had crumbled under the weight of its own corruption. But the fight for humanity's survival wasn't over. Not yet. Graves' heart burned with a new fire, one that wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about retaliation. "We can't let them win," Graves said, the words coming out with newfound determination. "If the Federation's fallen, then it's up to us. We're the last line of defense." Matthews' image flickered slightly, but his voice remained resolute. "I agree. We've set up a rendezvous point on the edge of the neutral zone. You and your team need to get there, make contact with our allies, and prepare for an assault on the Vexari fleet. This is it, Graves. This is humanity's last chance." Graves nodded, his mind already shifting into military mode. There were no guarantees, no room for failure. The war had escalated, and humanity was now on the back foot. But there was one thing he knew for certain: they weren't giving up. Not now. Not when they were this close to victory. "We'll get to the rendezvous," Graves said. "But we'll need to be ready. We're taking the fight to them." Hours later, as the ship descended toward the rendezvous point, the team sat in silence. Their bodies were battered, their spirits exhausted, but the fire of determination burned brighter than ever. This wasn't just a mission, it was a reckoning. They were fighting for something greater than themselves. They were fighting for the future of humanity. As the ship touched down on the desolate landscape of the neutral zone, the squad moved with purpose, their weapons at the ready. Graves could feel the gravity of what was coming, the final battle for Earth's survival. "Stay sharp," Graves said, his voice low and commanding. "This isn't just about surviving. This is about taking back what's ours." The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. They knew what was at stake. And they weren't about to let it slip away. They reached the rendezvous point, where a small fleet of ships lay waiting. The figures standing there, once thought to be mere remnants of the rebellion, now stood as humanity's last hope. It was time to unite with the remaining forces, to prepare for the final assault on the Vexari fleet. Graves! Came a voice from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, his face worn, but his presence commanding. We've been waiting for you. Now let's end this. Cliffhanger * as Graves and his team joined the ragtag fleet, the Vexari's forces loomed closer, their ships moving in unison, a vast, impenetrable armada. The final assault was imminent, and this would be the battle to determine humanity's fate. Would they rise from the ashes, or would the Vexari wipe them out once and for all? The last chapter of this war was about to be written.